Take me to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
Hey guys, hope you're having a great day.
Thanks for tuning into today's show.
So we have some important news to share with you, and we're just going to rip the Band-Aid off. Sarah and I are getting a divorce.
You guys might be totally in shock to hear this, especially after listening to us for the last 8 years. So we hope you guys just stick around for the next minute or two to just hear us out and let us share with you what we're going through. Chase and I are still friends, and we are absolutely committed to co-parenting our daughter Stella in the best possible way that we can. And we will still be bringing you weekly episodes. But due to some logistical issues in our own lives, Chase will continue as the primary host while I work on more of the production side with booking guests and working with the show. And I will occasionally stop by to say hi.
And we're still committed to learning about relationships, growing, and sharing our interviews with our great guests to help you guys improve yourselves and your relationships. And as we've always said, we're right along for the ride with you guys learning, and we're still committed to that. And we'll continue to gain knowledge from all these interviews to apply to ourselves and our future relationships as Sarah and I continue to grow individually.
Chase and I have gone through a lot of ups and downs over the last couple years, and as many relationships do. And in the end, we've decided that a divorce would be the next step in our journey. And we are incredibly grateful for our time together and for everything we've learned in this show that we will be able to continue to put into our lives and into our next relationships, and then into Chase and I's next relationship as co-parents together.
Absolutely. And we're very thankful for you guys for listening to the show. We hope that you continue to tune in to learn more about yourselves and how to improve your relationships.
And you guys might be having a lot of questions, and we completely understand that. Feel free to send us any messages. We will reply as best as we can, but we also really hope that you guys will respect us in this decision and our family, and know that we are doing what we feel is best for Chase and I individually and for Stella as her parents.
Yeah, and we never, if you've been listening to the show for a while, we don't really share too much of the details of our own relationship, and we debated a lot on how to share this. What should we say? Should we go into detail? Should we have our therapist on to do a show with her? Because we were in therapy for a few years and we love our therapist. I still see her individually. I think Sarah's still seeing her as well. And we decided that we would not do that because it's private. And I know, listening to a relationship podcast, you're probably like, what the heck? You want to know more, what happened? And that's why we're not sharing, is that we never shared really private stuff. And so why would we do that now? But just know that we tried and we went to therapy. We learned a lot about ourselves, each other, and made this decision with our eyes and hearts wide open. And, and we'll continue to grow and move forward and continue to learn. It's not, the journey doesn't stop here. We continue to learn about ourselves and wanting to improve ourselves in our future relationships.
And on that note, if Chase ever does share anything about our relationship or the divorce or anything like that on the show, I just want you guys to know that Chase and I have talked about that, and that I'm comfortable in that. And we're both comfortable with sharing the stuff that we do. So yeah, just want you guys to know that Chase and I highly respect each other, and we both want the best for each other. And yeah, we hope to transition this show as best as we can and to continue to keep best guests on to share the relationship advice for you guys.
Yeah, and Sarah will be involved in every show, listening to the whole show, like you said, booking guests, offering insights and recommendations. Yeah, so she's involved. There's nothing going behind her back. Or like she said, if I say something, Sarah is still very much
I'm here listening.
giving the final approval and all that. So we love you guys. We appreciate you tuning in as always. And in today's show, we talk about divorce. And again, we're not going to go into too many details about our own situation, but just know, like Sarah said, feel free to reach out, and we appreciate you guys tuning in and continuing to listen to the show. And on today's show, we welcome Lissy Abrahams, and we talk about separation and divorce. And Lissy is super qualified to talk about this. She has a master's in couple psychoanalytic psychotherapy, postgraduate in attachment psychoanalysis and couple relationships, Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and a Diploma of Teaching. And Lissy lives in Sydney, Australia, where she has a practice. And she's super passionate about helping couples, and especially couples going through separation or divorce. And today we talk about the things to think about if you're thinking about separation and divorce, how to make that decision. We also talk about, once you've made that decision, how to communicate in the best way possible, how to navigate all the logistics of separation and divorce, and if you have kids, how to co-parent in the best way possible. So Lissy gave us a lot of great information today. And as always, we appreciate you guys tuning in, listening to the show, and enjoy today's episode.
Hi, Lissy. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Today, we're going to talk about separation and divorce. And in the pre-show, you mentioned it's one of the things that you're passionate about in helping couples navigate it in the best way possible, because you've seen when it's not done well, and that can be pretty nasty and just not good for anyone involved, and certainly if there's kids as well. So today we're going to talk about that and how to do it the best way possible. And there's a lot to think about and a lot that goes on when separation and divorce happens. So why don't we start by having you tell us why you are passionate about helping people through this process and some of the big things to look out for, and we'll talk about how to navigate them.
All right, fantastic. One of the things with separation and divorce is that our lives with our partner have often been so woven together, and depending on how many years as well, there are so many aspects that need dismantling when we go through a separation. And we don't know how much of our lives are interwoven until we get to these points. And it's things we don't even expect. So we're going to need to make thousands and thousands of decisions all the time about how to navigate this, how to separate, how to go into two households, and how to separate out in terms of family and find our feet again in terms of all of that. So what I say can really help people is to have an anchor of integrity. And what I mean by an anchor of integrity is it's a guiding kind of principle that says, I'm going to operate treating my ex-partner with respect in every single matter that I choose, and myself as well. And so what that means is, it means if I'm going through a legal process, I'm not going to tear into them and treat them appallingly, even if they treat me badly. If you're going through talking to the children about what's happened, I'm not going to tear them down. I'm not going to make myself the victim of their other parent. It also means how I communicate with my ex-partner. So I'm going to make decisions based on treating this person with respect because it hurts me not to. So every time I have a go at my ex, or I yell at them, I write nasty messages, I say I'm going to get you or you're going to lose the kids, it actually hurts me as an individual to treat them like that. So it's not just about me, but it's also about them. But it's about having an anchor of integrity that guides every single decision you make. And when we use that anchor, we actually can find a much cleaner path through the separation than we would otherwise. It also goes to financials. You know, we have to understand that we need to go through a process that's fair and reasonable. if we're not treating our partner in a way that says they need to have kind of a fair and reasonable financial settlement as well, we will think that we're entitled to everything. So we have to be very careful. And for me, one of the biggest things I do with my clients is teach them about this anchor of integrity. And that's what all the decisions are based on from there.
That's huge and super important. And as you're talking, I'm realizing we're going to have people tuning in who are maybe in the middle of a divorce. They're thinking about divorce. They're finishing their divorce or separation. But I want to have you share with our listeners that may be thinking about divorce. Maybe they're going to therapy. They're trying to make it work. What do you tell your clients or someone that's listening to think about as far as making that decision? Do I stay, or is it time to say, this is just not going to work? Like that decision to go for the separation.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's so much in that huge decision about whether to end a significant relationship. And even if you've got a family, it makes it even more significant in that sense. There's so much more at stake. There's a lot to consider. And typically, I'm not saying for always, but typically women will consider this for a lot longer than men. I've been speaking with a couple of lawyers in Australia about this, and what they seem to find is that women will plan it for several years. They'll make sure that they're financially okay enough. They'll try and get help a lot more often with therapists. And men often make a split decision, and they haven't actually thought through all of the aspects. So there is a difference there. But what I would say to anybody in that situation who's thinking of separating, I would really question these questions. Here are the questions. What have I brought into this relationship that's actually about my history, that's playing out unconsciously or consciously with my partner? So if you've had a trauma history, if you've had experiences of fear or a lot of shame, a lot of those earlier experiences can find themselves in the couple relationship, and couples don't know what to do with this. So they can fight a lot. They can have a lot of differences and not know what to do with those differences. So I would really make it an individual journey before making a decision about leaving. Do I understand myself enough and what I've brought into this relationship and what I might be playing out with my partner, not in a fun way, but what I might be playing out unconsciously with them? So that's one of the biggest things that I'd be asking. The next thing I'd want to have people think about is, do you understand your ego? Now, as humans, we are wired to have the language centers in our left hemisphere of our brain make wonderful stories about ourselves and our partner. Now, our ego is centered around me, my, I. It's a very self-referential part of ourselves. And what we do is we create stories about ourselves where we're either better than our partner or we're our partner's victim. So we can make ourselves better, that we can create stories that they're not good enough for us, that they're not good in relationships, that they're not good looking enough. We can make these fantastical stories about our partner that make us feel superior to them, or we can feel that they're not good for us in the sense that they can make us feel like we're not good enough, we're unworthy, that we're their victim in some way, and we can become quite complainy, or we can start whining. If you're doing this in your couple relationship, I think you've got a perfect opportunity, instead of buying into that version that you're superior or inferior, to actually go and get some work and work out, what am I doing with my ego? What is it that I'm doing, and why am I telling these stories? Because it's not from nowhere that we tell these stories. They're very much wired up inside of us, and we all do them to a certain degree. But they can ruin, the ego can ruin relationships. We're often putting stuff on our partner that isn't actually true. It's just our version of what's true. We believe our stories. That's where they're really dangerous. I've seen many relationships destroyed because of this. But when we understand our ego, we can understand that we're actually harming our relationship by not understanding this really fundamental way that we operate. So they're probably the main things I do. I'm not talking about domestic violence or anything like that, but I think we all bring stuff to a relationship. And if we can really work that out, what it is we're putting in it and what we blame our partner for not being good enough, or whether we're griping or resentful, these are coming from our ego. So if we can understand that, we can understand why we behave in the way we do. They're the biggest things I would check out first. And the other thing I'd do is I would make sure that there's an opportunity for growth for ourselves and our partner. So whether you're doing courses online, podcasts, reading books that can help with your relationship, or going to therapy, I would make it a developmental process, because there is so much that we can learn in the context of being in a relationship that we can't when we're out. When we're in a relationship, we have to kind of look at ourselves and say, how are we behaving? So the relationship becomes a vehicle for development if we can use it like that. If not, then we will often make decisions to end it because it's too unpleasant, too unbearable, or it doesn't feel safe enough. So I would make those the top three, really.
Thank you so much for that, Lissy. And to jump back into where we were at as far as when we're going through the separation, that respect is a super important foundation to take forward as the process begins and certainly throughout the process. And you mentioned, threatening language or how you communicate with your ex and doing it from a place of respect. What would you tell someone who is dealing with an ex who is threatening? Hey, if you do this or this, I'm going to take the kids, or I'm going to take the house, or this or that. How can you talk to them to kind of bring the situation down, or so that doesn't continue?
Yeah, well, it's really difficult to control somebody else and where they go. So first of all, you'd have to take action and make sure things in your life are secured, such as telling the police if you need to, or speaking to your lawyer. But in terms of communicating with our ex, we have to be really careful not to trigger them into fight or flight, because what happens we've got these two parts of our brain in the left and right hemisphere called the amygdala. And when we become frightened, we go into fight or flight. And what happens with that is our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases, and then we're going to release hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol that are going to be surging through our body like we're a wild animal going into fight or flight, running for our lives. So that often plays out with ex-partners during a separation, that if they get triggered, they're going to go off. Now, we all have a kind of flavour. Are we fighters or are we fleers? Some of us completely flee and they escape and avoid situations, whereas others will fight. They'll arc up and they'll make their bodies big and angry. They'll use their voice to scream. So there's different things we can do. We can actually treat them with respect, which means we've got more chance of not triggering their fight or flight response. But we also have to manage our own, because there is a threat in separation and divorce. We don't want to not see our children. We don't want to cut all our money in half. We don't want to have to be alone. There's so many things that are threatening to us by nature of a separation. So it's really important when we're communicating, that anchor of integrity and having respect with how we talk and communicate. That's our best shot at not triggering their anxiety. But if we're not making threats and we're coming from a place that says, we're going to work this out, we've got things we need to work through. So let's try and keep our communication respectful. We can't help if they join us in that, but we can certainly do our part in putting that out there. Just because we don't like our ex-partner, just because we don't respect them anymore, doesn't mean we have to show that in all of our interactions. And like I said at the beginning, we've got so many decisions we need to make. When we're in flight or fight mode and we're using our amygdala to sort of pump us and get us ready for survival mode, we're not able to make decisions in that space. So that comes from a different part of the brain called the frontal lobes, and that's where we make decisions. We option generation. There's so much thinking that has to happen. But when we're running for our lives, we're not making those decisions. The decisions are really just reactions. Do we run or do we fight? And so when we're with our partner, we have to make the decision, keep ourselves as calm as possible so that we can keep our head on and make important decisions.
So being calm is certainly important in any relationship, but especially a relationship that is ending and you're trying to communicate with a former partner. And that kind of leads me to the next topic of dispute resolution, because that's everything you're trying to do. You're trying to detangle your lives. And so you're talking about kids, finances, house, cars, pets, splitting these things up, and being able to talk about that from a calm place is going to be super important. So what do you tell your clients who are navigating these things, the best ways and tools to have these conversations. And a lot of times I say dispute because, a lot of times it's not going to be like, oh, you take the dog. Oh, yeah, sure. Ciao. It's like that. I don't know if the opening scene of Wedding Crashers, where it's these two divorce lawyers, and at first they're yelling at each other, and then they say a few things, and it's a comedy. But then suddenly the husband's giving the wife everything, and it's just like, you want this? Check. Oh, yeah. And it probably rarely goes like that. So how do we have conversations about these disputes that are most productive?
Yeah, it's a great one, because what's really at stake, and especially if you've got children, it's a game changer if you have kids. If you don't, you can separate out more or less and get on with your lives. But we ask a lot of humans. We are asking ourselves to untangle what was originally set up, something for life. We set this up for life, and then we untangle it all, and then we have to stay together throughout each other's lives for many decades in some shape or form. And then if we've got children, we have to, if we can keep them centre stage, to make the decisions based on what are in their best interests. Because what we do know, research has shown that 75% of children are fine after 3 years from the beginning of the separation through that. But the thing that makes them fine and resilient and come out just as well as kids whose parents haven't separated, it's actually the co-parenting relationship. So whatever your decisions you need to make, especially if you've got children, if you can make them from a place that says, we want our children to be well. If we don't do this well enough and form a good enough a relationship where we can communicate, we can make decisions for our kids just like we did under one roof. If we can do this thing, our children won't suffer with anxiety and depression and feel overwhelmed or have to look after us. So the best thing we can do is in terms of working things out, is we can look after our self-care. Our children do not want to find us drunk on the sofa after our separation. They don't want to have to clear up the alcohol. They don't want to go to school feeling sick. They don't want to have to hear our howling in the night. They don't want to hear this. They need to know that we've got our eyes on them. So one of the things that's a really good mechanism for keeping our heads on is actually by looking after our children. So if we've got mental health difficulties, we have to go and deal with that. And it's not to have a go at people. We're asking ourselves to make important decisions and look after our children when we've got often the least ability to do that, because we might be struggling so much. But we can't ask our children to look after us. So the best is self-care. If we can look after ourselves, we can make really good decisions from that place, making sure that our children are parented, not that they have to parent us. So that is a really important way of kind of anchoring parents as well, that they've got these really precious people who you don't want to gamble with their well-being, because that's going to go with them through life. So that's one of the biggest ones. And we need our heads on for also how we're going to tell our children. So if we've got this co-parenting relationship, they've got layers of security under them. And by helping parents understand that, then they can make different decisions and use that as an anchor.
Before we continue on, we want to tell you about today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Euphoria. How often do you have sex and say, it was okay? Have you gotten to the point where you think okay sex is the best sex you can have? Well, I have good news for you. Bigger and better orgasms are coming your way. Euphoria creates intimacy products that fundamentally change the way you experience pleasure. With all-natural botanical formulas that were crafted for women and people with vulvas, Euphoria is like your pleasure godmother, here to remind you that you and your body can do amazing things and that you deserve to climax every time. In the past, we've been limited to how we talk about mind-body connection in relation to health and wellness. Sex and pleasure are major factors when it comes to overall well-being, and there's science to prove it. Orgasms have been shown to boost your mood, reduce stress, support your sleep quality, and even benefit your immune system. There is a reason you feel more relaxed after you masturbate, and they just feel really good. When it comes to our bodies, what's good for nature is good for us. Foria's formulas are made with 100% organic, all-natural, sustainably grown ingredients to give people what they need to fully embody our most sensual selves, the way nature intended. My favorite product is the Intimacy Awaken Arousal Oil, and ladies, let me tell you, it does just that. It's made with organic, broad-spectrum CBD and 9 plant-based aphrodisiacs that work with the body to enhance pleasure and arousal and ease discomfort. Whether you're in a long-term relationship or single and just want to get more in touch with your sexuality, the Awaken Arousal Oil helps you awaken your body for a pleasurable experience, whether solo or with a partner. Foria is offering a special deal for our listeners. Get 20% off your first order by visiting foriawellness.com/IDO or use the code IDO at checkout. That's Foria Wellness, FORIA wellness.com/IDO for 20% off your first order. Like I said, I recommend trying their Intimacy Awaken Arousal Oil because it feels so good, but there are so many other choices to choose from that I know you guys will love. You'll thank me later.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp.
Nowadays, it is definitely okay to talk about our mental health and happiness. We are not meant to keep everything inside, and therapy truly helps. But what is therapy exactly? Well, it is whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're struggling in your relationship, or maybe you are super happy, but you want to be proactive in your relationship and look for some tools that might help you in the future. Or maybe you just feel overwhelmed with life and need someone to talk to. Whatever you need, don't be ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better today because you deserve to feel happy.
And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours.
Join the millions of people who are seeing what therapy is really all about. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/IDO. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/IDO. Today's episode is also brought to you by Like a Kitten. Has your sex life fallen into the same old dull routine? After being in a long-term relationship, that's totally normal. But I have great news for you. You can break those habits with a fun, sexy box from Like a Kitten. Like a Kitten will ship you a gift box with all your favorite erotic essentials, from vibrators and massage oils to robes and handcuffs. It's your one-stop shop for a perfect evening. This month, they're helping you choose your own adventure with their BYOB box, aka Build Your Own Box. You get to choose one item out of each of their 6 categories, from toys, beauty products, lubes and cleansers, games, sexy accessories, and lingerie. Within each category, you have 8 or more products you can choose from, so you can build an experience that's customized to your specific desires. For example, a few items that I picked were the Naughty or Nice game, a satin robe, an aromatherapy candle, and some amazing massage oil. I've gotten a few of the Like a Kitten boxes, but being able to pick my favorite items has definitely been the most fun. And not only is it so much fun, but it is a great, sexy activity to do with your partner. It can help build the excitement for what's to come. What's amazing is that the box only cost $69, and some of the vibrators alone retail for more than $69. So the entire box of 6 gifts is such a great deal. And what is also so cool is that a portion of all the sales goes to charities that focus on women's empowerment, education, and health. So you feel good about feeling good. Right now, Like a Kitten is offering our listeners 20% off and free shipping when they go to likeakitten.com/I-do or enter the code I-do at checkout. Just go to likeakitten.com/I-do or use the code I-do to get 20% off these incredible boxes. Likeakitten.com/I-do. The link is also in the episode description. So it's obviously great when both people in the relationship are on the same page when it comes to making these decisions and agreeing on the way to proceed with co-parenting. But what happens when the opinions are slightly different and maybe one parent is, like you said, not taking as good care of themselves? How does that other parent step in to help the other person and then also make the best decision for the child?
It's a great question, because we can't change someone else. We can try to help them, but we have to do it carefully. Remember, I was talking before about fight or flight, that we don't want to say, listen, if we say I'm concerned with how much you might be drinking at this point, or I'm worried you're not taking care of yourself, we have to be careful how we put that across, because we don't want to trigger them. We don't want them to go into fight or flight in that and then cause a greater wedge. We have to know that we all have an individual journey to re-find ourselves after a separation. And some parents may go into a bit of a dip. It's about maybe speaking to their parent and getting them to support them a bit more, or in people in their vicinity who might be able to kind of keep an eye on them and make sure that they're a little bit more supported during this process. But there's a limit to how much control we can have or our influence on somebody post-separation. So I guess we can appeal to the kids' well-being and what they're needing. But I think, Sarah, to answer your question, I'd be looking to call their external supports at this point. It depends how serious it is, if we can't communicate with them directly about that.
What are some things that individuals can think about moving forward in a co-parenting relationship? How do you help clients who are like Sarah and I? It's new to us. It's like, how do we become good co-parents? Like, where do we start?
So that's a great question. And I think that if I can just put this to any parents who are separating and newly separated or thinking of it, I guess the thing is, if you can just put your child or children at the center and ask, the foundation is, do we want this child to be well in every single way? And of course you do. I mean, most of us love our children so much. So if that's the core, the base of what you're looking for is to how to raise your child healthily, loving both parents, having a meaningful relationship with both of you, then everything will emanate from that. So, you know, in Australian law, I'm not sure how it is over there. Our first thing, we've got two main considerations of the family law at the courts is basically that both parents have a meaningful relationship with their children. The only reason this won't happen is if the children aren't safe. So if you can take safety away and you know that your children are safe with either parent, doesn't mean you parent the same way, doesn't mean you have the same bedtimes, even though you'd love that, doesn't mean you feed them exactly the same food. But if you have two households where that child is loved and looked after and not falling through the cracks, and you're working on discussing things across like bridging the two homes, your child is going to have a chance to thrive in that environment. They can make the change. You just have to be able to make sure that they're not getting dropped all the time. So working on this foundation that you want your child to be well or children to be well, and you have discussions about what's happening in their lives and what do we need to think about. So it's just making sure that you don't have gaps for the kids. They don't have to take school bags, a bag to school every day about whose house they're living with. You move things for them. So you're making sure that you two can keep your communication open from now through all the years. It's really about keeping that communication respectful and open as well.
And then how about details? Like there's so many things about, Stella is just turned 6. So, right now Sarah and I are talking about school and making sure we're on the same page with what she's supposed to be reading at home, and communicating around that. But there's just, her diet in a sense, like, which not that we talk about her diet, like from a structured, super strict way, but like making sure that we're on the same page.
Well, I guess the question for many parents is, were you on the same page living in the same house? Often not.
Right.
But one person would be the caretaker of that as much as possible, but now you haven't got that. I guess if you just keep going back to something, and we can have very strong views about diet or sleep times or how much homework focus we need or reading focus we need versus hanging out and playing a game together. It's a lot but I would go big picture. If we go into the minutiae, we can get lost and very distressed. If you have this kind of feeling that in that household, the other parent cares about my child, cares that the child is kind of well enough, then I think you're doing pretty well. But you don't have any control about what happens over there. It gets really difficult when you're talking about the binary, things in the binary, like what school to go to. It's either this one or this one. You can't go to both. For those things, it's kind of like, let's go and do more research. Let's go back to the school and check it out. But you are going to have difference. It might be about what you can afford as well. In Australia, we have a private school system, which is very costly, and a lot of parents still sign up to that. So it's kind of like, well, can we afford this? How are we going to make those decisions as well? So what I want to say is ultimately your child will be fine if you two are fine. And all of those decisions, they're the tweaking. What kind of school do we want our child to go to? Neither of you want your child to go to a terrible school. So just have faith that you both care about these things. And as long as you're not doing any revenge choices, if you know what I'm saying, that you're not doing anything just to spite the other parent, and it's all coming from that base of what's best for our daughter, then you're going to have differences. But to remember the big picture is your child will be fine if you both are well, if you're feeling that you can protect her, if she feels safe with you, that you don't have mental health issues at this time, or that that she doesn't have to look after you. They're the main things.
And how about talking with the children? Obviously, there's the initial conversation, and it depends on the child's age. But we told Stella, and she's just 6, and she's perfectly fine. She had a couple questions, but not really. But now I'm kind of wondering, like, do we need to have another conversation with her or to check in with her how she's feeling? Because she seems like nothing has happened. Adapting very fast.
I hear you. A lot of kids are really okay. The reason they're okay for now, they may change later and they might get upset about things down the track. But at the moment, she's feeling safe enough to go through the journey with you both, and you've explained something to her enough for now. This doesn't mean that you'll never have to have another conversation with her. And I quite like it when parents just every now and then, like just if it's new, just keep tapping in saying, how are you feeling about it all? Must be a bit strange for you at the moment, to try and just get into their shoes and question it. If they say, look, I'm fine, I don't want to talk about it, I'm good, and they seem okay, that's okay, as long as they get the sense that you're with them on the journey. So you don't want to hit them over the head when they come home. How are you doing? Are you okay? Are you really okay? But you want to just check in and say, what's it like going to school with this information about what's happening with the family? Is it a bit strange for you? Do you talk about it with your friends? But just every now and then. I wouldn't do it all the time. If she's fine, she's fine. But she'll have some areas that really annoy her later probably, but you don't know when that'll be. It's also difficult to know. Sometimes kids can carry some private shame around the separation. So if you can see she's too hesitant to talk about it, you don't want to make her talk, but you can put things in there saying, is it difficult that your parents are separated and maybe your best friends aren't? Does that make you feel funny? And it doesn't matter if she doesn't answer, it's that you've got it in your mind and she knows that you've got that. So it's a really important one, that one. The other thing is to really help your child understand, and children for others, that relationships are good. Just because this one's ended, it doesn't mean that they can't look forward to relationships in the future. We don't want to destroy their idea of relationships and have regrets, or tell them we have regrets, because they need to understand that they were made in love. with this union, we chose this, we wanted them. And even though this relationship's gone in this particular direction, we don't regret any of it because we don't want to shame the core of them. You know, for a lot of children, we are biologically 50% of each parent's DNA. So if we're saying, yeah, I regret your father, he was a horrible partner, that shames them. And so we want to make sure that we still support the choice of their other parent, and we wouldn't change it for anything is really important for them.
Yeah, I suppose that's my own perfectionist attitude, like, you know, or yeah, just being like, hey, are you okay, Stella? And I haven't done that, but it's like, yeah, kids are resilient. And she's like, just fine. And obviously, yeah, you want the best for your kid. And so, you know, I guess it's natural to be a bit worried, obviously, but she has been very resilient. And it was valuable what you mentioned of yeah, just asking the questions, of checking in, saying, hey, how are you feeling, this and that? And she might be like, yeah, all good, you know, and that's what I think her response would be. And again, she's just 6, but.
And I actually have had these conversations with her, and yeah, I mean, her response has just been like a little couple questions here and there, like asking, you know, why we don't live in the same house anymore. But in terms of her feeling emotional about it, she's just like, okay, like she just kind of moves on quickly from it. So yeah, I guess for now we're okay.
And wait till the teenage years.
You'd know she's not okay unless she's a little bit of a perfectionist as well. And then she might be kind of hiding some of those things. But if you don't have a sense she's hiding things and that she actually is okay, that's great. I mean, she knows she can talk to you, doesn't she? I mean, she's able if she wants. She knows you're there. And what you're doing by having the conversations is you're letting her know, I'm not afraid to talk to you about this. This is not something that we need to put in a vault and never discuss again. And we don't just have to, pretend it never happened. If it happened, you can talk about each other, you can support each other. If she has this sense that, and any child in this situation, if they have the sense that their parents think that the child's other parent is still a good person, for whatever reason, even if you blow it up with an affair, but you don't make that the whole character. So, you know, life is complex, but you can still hold on to their parent as someone who is a good enough person. That's good for the kid. You know, instead of ripping down the other parent, when they know that their parents can unite in their minds about each other, do you know what I mean by that? That they can say, yes, we were a couple, it didn't work out, but your dad's still a great guy, or your mum's still an amazing this and that. And you can slip it into conversation. They feel safe with that. It means that their parents can hold something that holds them still together. They're still linked in a particular way. And it's quite loving still. It's not having a go at them all the time, but it's loving to say, I think your mum's awesome at this and this and this. And they can engage with that. They don't have to kind of cut their parents in half just because they've gone to the other parent's house.
Yeah, that's super valuable, Lissy. And you've given us and our listeners a lot of great information today. Is there anything that we skipped over or that you want to emphasize before we wrap up?
Oh, so much. Okay, if we can just go back to kids for a moment, I think if we can just really understand, so for us going through a separation, it's a big deal. For kids going through a separation, it's a huge deal as well. They can have so much anxiety, and because they've got major changes going on. So they've got changes that might be in their financial situation, how their parents take care of them. They can have changes in their parent-child relationships. Their routine can change, and their home or school might change. We have to do this superhuman feat, I feel, when we separate. We have to understand how much our kids are going through and attend to that. Plus, we have to get really used to the idea that this person that we were so attached to is no longer in our lives in the way they were. Now, that doesn't mean they're not in our lives, but no longer in the way they were. And so we are going to be dealing often with depression, potentially, a grief process, definitely, grief, anxiety, where there's so many worries at this time, things that are uncertain. And when there's uncertainty, there will be anxiety often. We might be dealing with a lot of shame about how the relationship ended up. We make all these promises to each other, if we've had a commitment ceremony of some sort, and it's all really lovely, but the reverse of that is often very shameful, and we can feel quite distressed. So we've got kids who are going through a lot. We're also going through a lot, and we're dealing with so many feelings as our kids, but we just really need to be as well supported as possible and to give yourself the gift of getting really well supported. You won't need it forever, but you do need to get back on your feet. So like I said at the beginning, to really understand your ego and what you do when you're frightened, your fight or flight responses, how you deal with these emotions of grief and anxiety, go and grab some support. If you've got a wise person in your community, really talk to them. If you don't, go to a therapist. Do listen and read. Be careful who you talk to. If you're talking to friends who love drama, crises, love telling you why your ex is an absolute creep and joins you in stories, that's not helpful. So be careful who you talk to and get really well supported. It is one of the most massive things you're going to go through in life, and it is painful and lonely. So really look after yourself in that along the way. I'd say they're the main things.
Well, Lissy, thank you so much for that and for all of the great information you gave us and our listeners today. We really appreciate you coming on the show. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you online, and then we'll say goodbye?
Yes, for sure. You can find me online at lissyabrahams.com, and I've got some resources online as well. And I just want to say, Chase and Sarah, thank you so much for having me today. It's been such a pleasure from my end. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your listeners about this area that is so important to do as well as possible. So thank you.
And all of the links, as we already mentioned, are on the website idopodcast.com. And yeah, thank you so much, Lissy.
Thanks very much.
As always, thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. As always, all the links to the guest, as well as any of their recommendations, will be in the show notes page. You can find the link to that in the episode description or by going to idopodcast.com. Click on the podcast tab up at the top, and you will have access to all the episodes that we've ever done. There are over 300 of them. And while you're on our website, if you haven't checked out our free 14-day Happy Couple Challenge, we really hope you do. It's a free email challenge that we send to you. It's 14 days of fun, easy, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And if you're looking for something that provides a little more help with working on your relationship, whether it's improving intimacy or communication with your partner, or just bringing the spark back, we would love for you guys to check out our online course, Spark My Relationship. We're offering $100 off to all of our listeners if you go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. We've worked with over 15 psychologists and therapists to create the real life tools and strategies that they are teaching their clients. So we wanted to give them to you. It's a self-paced online course that can be done in as little as a month or up to 3 months. You can really decide how much or how little you want to do with your partner, or maybe just yourself. So we hope you guys check that out. It's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Have a great day.